we opened up to the public, and it was nice and slow at first. I always told them, crawl, walk, run. We're gonna crawl along and see how it goes before I put any more money, because I financed everything.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 84 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with one of the founders of Brooklyn Brothers Pizzeria. Please welcome Brett Alkan. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview folks around Camano Island and beyond. If you want to stay up to date on events, businesses, and even hear a little history of this area, subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. Thanks for listening. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. On this episode, I got to speak with Brett Alkan, who is one of the founders of Brooklyn Brothers Pizzeria, who many of you know, at least the pizza company, because it's here in the complex, and many of you have had some of their amazing New York-style thin crust pizza, which after going through this interview, I have been craving pizza ever since. But that's just a side note. So I got to speak with him about his experience prior to starting Brooklyn Brothers, and then kind of how it's evolved and how it's done and everything like that, as well as how is it done during COVID and everything, because there's a lot of things. They didn't open originally as a delivery pizza company, so most of their business was sit down, come inside, and so they've had to adjust and do different things like that. So anyways, we get into all of those things and more. Plus, I've known Brett for a while here. Brooklyn Brothers has been here, and he's an experienced business owner and has a lot of, he's been in business for a long time. He's been in lots of different types of businesses. So I think of him as a mentor. So it's great to be able to sit down, talk with him. I've asked him about different business decisions in the past for myself. And so anyways, it's great to hear his background, his history, and I know you'll enjoy it too. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Brett Alkan. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the owner of Brooklyn Brothers Pizzeria. Welcome to the podcast, Brett Alkan.
How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
And I should say one of the owners, not the owner.
Okay.
There's a group of us, and I'm one of maybe the primary one, but one of 4 or 5.
Okay.
Depending on the location.
Sounds good. All right. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Brett.
Well, where do I start? I was born in Minnesota. My father moved us around quite a bit, not military, but we moved from there to New York and Ohio and Pittsburgh, and went to college in Ohio. And after that, took my first job in Kansas City, went from there back to Minneapolis, from there to graduate school in Chicago, and so I've been, and then from there to Cleveland, from Cleveland to Des Moines, Iowa, and from Des Moines, Iowa to here.
Wow.
So, and this is the longest, in Puget Sound region, longest I've ever lived in one place in my life. So,
okay.
Loving it. Yeah, I
nice.
got here in 98, so.
Okay.
I think so, 96, 98, something like that.
Okay. What was the reason for all the moving?
Well, when I was growing up, my dad is a civil engineer, and he started, he would do high-rise in one location and get bored with that, then went on and did stadiums at another firm in another city. He'd figure that all out, and then he went and did bulk material handling systems and figured that out. And so I think he just, I don't know if it was boredom or opportunity, but he liked to change things up a little bit. And then, so that was the main reason.
Okay.
Some of it was, civil engineering is, based on building things, and when we've had recessions, they're the first to go. So
right.
At those times, sort of forced some of the moves probably. But
okay. Nice.
Yeah.
How was that for you then, growing up in all these different locations and everything?
It didn't bother me. It always bothered me to leave, but then I always made new friends where we went. So, but I will say that I really didn't want to do that to my kids.
Yeah.
My friends from grade school, I'm not in touch with any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Middle school, I'm in touch with a few, in high school. But I think I look at my kids now, and they've got relationships from preschool until today, and
Yeah.
so I wanted them to have that. I think it's nice to grow up in a community and really have some roots in it. So
Yeah.
that's so yeah, I probably missed that. But
Nice. What was your favorite place that you lived while growing up?
Probably, I suppose, Minneapolis. Yeah, it's a really beautiful place with the lakes, and I don't really mind winter too much. So the winters were good. People there, they go out whether it's summer or cold. They're out doing stuff, and it's the northern Minnesota's beautiful, and the lakes again, and the outdoor activities are great. So
Nice. Very cool. All right. So then, where did you graduate high school then?
in Worthington, Ohio, so
Okay.
just north of Columbus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And then upon graduating then, did you go straight to college or did you just work for a while?
Nope, straight to college, straight into a job. Yeah, so it was the plan. I was back in my day. That's what people did.
Yeah.
It wasn't taking time off to find yourself, which I in hindsight I wish I'd done a little of that, but
Yeah.
that just wasn't what was expected.
Right.
So,
So what did you do in college and where'd you go and what'd you study?
Bowling Green State University. It's in northwestern Ohio, small town school, sort of like Washington State here.
Okay.
And studied business because that was where the jobs were, and was in a fraternity and had a good time and did pretty well and came out with a couple job offers and took a job.
Nice.
So
What was your first job out of college then?
I worked for Owens Corning Fiberglass,
Okay.
and in there it was called the textile and industrial business. So I sold the fiberglass that goes into boats, bathtubs. I sold fiberglass to 3M for the tape that you need a knife to get through because it has the fiberglass in it. I sold them
Yeah.
that fiberglass. So
Okay.
stuff like that.
Okay.
Not the insulation side, but on the industrial side.
Yeah. So were you mainly in the sales department then?
Yeah, at that time, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice. When you were doing sales and stuff, was that something growing up that you had felt like, did you have a good sales mind and ability, or did you have to kind of learn that on the fly?
I've always, I think, done a pretty good job communicating with people and building relationships, and so that probably made me a decent salesperson. At least in that, it was more of a relationship selling than transactional selling.
Right.
I didn't enjoy transactional selling where it's the pressure's on to make it happen. I don't enjoy that, but building relationships so you have that trust and making them want to do business with you because they like you and
Right.
they have confidence that you're going to deliver what you're selling. That I was better at. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I grew up thinking that was what I didn't know what I was going to do when I went to college. I maybe I did think business, but I didn't really know what. So
Okay. Nice. So how long were you with that company?
maybe 4 years, 5 years. It's hard to remember. I'd have to look at my resume. But it was a long time ago. But I was there, started in Kansas City. I got promoted, went to Minneapolis, and then I went to work for General Electric in the plastics part of General Electric. And there I did market development for a couple of years out of Minneapolis.
Okay.
So,
What did that look like?
well, they do engineering thermoplastics, which are the thermoplastics. It's not the stuff you make bottles and cans out of. It's more the plastic that has some structural, or Lexan is used for you can see through Lexan, so it's used for, I'm trying to think of what, canopies and things like that. And they had certain thermoplastics that great chemical resistance and different factors. So what I was tasked with was going out into the marketplace and finding new applications to convert like aluminum or steel or what have you into these thermoplastics.
Yeah.
So it was I enjoyed it. It
Yeah.
was a lot of fun.
That's really cool. What were some of the things that you kind of figured out that you could switch over?
Well, I worked with some furniture companies on getting, especially medical furniture, where there was more. Plastics compared to the wood products would be easier to clean. They more durable. They don't necessarily dent if they're designed well. They can be lighter. I worked aerospace defense and worked on parts for missile systems and replacing things that were die-cast aluminum with engineering thermoplastics so it would lighten the load. And I spent a lot of time, I'd forgotten about this, but working on, they may still be developing, I don't know, that was a long time ago. You look at an infantryman carrying ammunition with the brass casings, the lead bullets, is very heavy. So a lot of companies were trying to make the bullets or the casings of the bullets, instead of out of brass, out of plastic.
Really?
And then design the chamber that you would fire it in heavier so it could withstand the pressure and you would have less weight in the ammunition. And therefore the troop could be able to carry more. So that's probably still ongoing. I don't know, but that was one thing I worked on too.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Interesting stuff.
Very cool. How long were you with GE then?
I think 3 or 4 years. And the next stuff with GE Plastics was they were headquartered in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which is way western Massachusetts, and it's a small town in the middle of nowhere, and I was a single guy, and that did not sound very appealing. So I wasn't very excited about, but at that age and that stage of my career, you look for advancement, and so that's what sort of was supposed to happen. But what I did is I went back to graduate school. And so from there I went to Chicago to go to graduate school.
Nice. What were you studying in graduate school?
Well, I went to business school, and it was finance and strategy were my two areas of focus.
Okay.
So,
nice.
yeah.
Cool. What was did you have a reason for picking those two?
Finance, because I hadn't had much exposure. I'd been on the sales and marketing and side of things, so I wanted to round out with some financing. And the strategy was more, I really enjoyed it. And, strategic planning was something that I wanted to get involved with. So I picked that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So what did you do upon graduating from that?
First job, I went with British Petroleum in their chemical division, which produced a lot of chemical intermediates for plastics. Sort of why I guess they had an interest in me. But and I worked on building new chemical plants, so doing all the financial legwork of can we build it? What are the economics? Basically justifying the expenditure of funds on building a chemical plant with new technology. So it was boring, but maleic anhydride was basically they had developed a new process to produce maleic anhydride. And so they wanted to commercialize it. So we were looking at different opportunities, both licensing and greenfield builds of building out this technology. So,
And what are those two things? Maleic anhydride.
Maleic anhydride is an acid. Oh boy, you're going to get me now. That is another. It basically is used to make other chemicals that end up in plastics a lot. Maleic anhydride. Oh, geez, you're going to really test me now. I used to know all this stuff because I had to study it all, but it also could be used to make butadiene, which went into like spandex. So stuff like that. It was like a chemical intermediate.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. I was just like,
I wasn't a chemist, but I was the business side, and so I learned all about fluid bed reactors and catalysts and all the processing stuff. But it wasn't required to be my long suit. So
nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Where'd you go after there?
So British Petroleum, and then I took a flyer with a small plastics distribution firm that was based in Des Moines, Iowa. And at that time, I had gotten married, and we had one child, and so I moved to Des Moines and worked for that company for another 2-3 years, And, it was a small, privately held family thing, and it just didn't work out. Just
Okay.
one of those things.
Yep.
And so from there is when we made it out here.
Okay.
So we had 2 kids, and we wanted to be by family.
Yep.
Obviously, family's a huge help, and that intergenerational teaching that goes on, I think, is very valuable. And
Yeah.
so we wanted to be around parents, and my parents were the logical choice, and they were in Seattle, so off we went.
Okay. So when had they moved out here then? Because you were still bouncing around, it sounds like.
They moved out in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my dad bought these apartment buildings in Everett, downtown Everett, in the 80s.
Okay.
And so that's what he was doing, and I wanted to be out here. I first came to Seattle when I was 13 years old to go backpacking,
Okay.
and just fell in love with Seattle, and had always wanted to live in Seattle. It was just sort of the thing out there. And then, so when we were in Iowa, and it's like, well, the jobs that I could get very easily were in Houston, Chicago, or New Jersey, because those are your hotbeds for plastics and chemical intermediates and stuff, and none of those appealed. Well, Chicago would have been okay, but really, BASF and a bunch of, I just didn't want to go to either of those locations.
Yeah.
So we decided to come out here and be by family.
Okay.
And that's what we got us out here.
Nice. What was your plan upon coming out here?
Well, I went to work for the family, for the real estate.
Okay.
And then got lured away into the .com thing for a while. So I went and worked for 3 or 4 different .com companies back in the late 90s, right?
Yeah.
And had a lot of fun and good experience, and learned a lot.
Yeah.
And none of them went public or anything like that, but I don't regret it a bit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think, now startups and things like that are pretty not common, but like everyone knows that there's startups and that they're fast paced and they kind of know the idea of what goes into startups. But like to actually be in one, it's like going through a business lesson, but like on fast forward, because like everything, you have to start learning everything right then, right there, to keep up with what's happening.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you? Like, especially coming from like some big industry companies that were more slow moving and doing that.
I loved it. I mean, I loved putting in the long hours, and and you're right, everything you were doing, it was for the first time, so you were learning as you went. And I'll never forget, I worked for one, it was called Free Edgar, and that was the first one. And, our site slowed down to a crawl one day, and we didn't know why. And of course, our technology guys are like, it's your ads that you're putting on there, because I was out selling ads for the site. What it turned out to be is our on our servers, and we hosted all our own servers, which today just doesn't happen.
Right.
But our server logs were they were just accumulating all the data. They were never deleting anything. So the server logs got full. The servers just basically wouldn't function. So it was an ironic thing and it was like a lesson learned for everyone there.
Yeah.
But that was the pains, and it was crazy. And raising money, did a lot of raising money for different startups. And,
Wow.
And I enjoyed that, dealing with the VCs and, pitching and answering their questions.
Yeah.
It was good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's one of those worlds that like I think a lot of people hear about and they like the idea of them, but most people aren't cut out to actually work in that type of environment.
I would say, in the old days, it was a lot of risk because you went in, and I don't know how it is now, but back then you worked for peanuts, and you got a bunch of options, and that's where the upside was.
Yeah.
And so there was the risk of what you were missing out on by having a job at a regular firm, like you say.
Right.
Now, today, I think a lot of, especially the technology guys, get paid pretty well. I think, maybe not, except for the founders. So it probably has changed a little bit.
Yeah.
But
yeah, from what I've heard, just reading different books and stuff, it does sound like, because there was one book, I forget which book it was, but they were talking about this person who has been, it was an interview, and he was talking about stardom in Hollywood versus stardom in a startup. So like a startup, taking that from zero to sell versus being a Hollywood actor and all of a sudden having a hit movie and getting famous. And he's like, which one is harder to deal with? And he said, the Hollywood for sure, because you go from having no money and just being a starving artist to all of a sudden having tons of money and all these options and all these different things. He's like, a startup, you go through and eventually you get your first round and you might get, $1 million. But that doesn't go to you, that goes to the business. You're still living on peanuts and you're not really. So when you finally make it to the point where you sell and make it, like, he's like, you have had to put in so much sweat equity that you've earned to that point. Whereas sometimes as an actor, like, you feel like it's magic and it just happens overnight. And so that was a really interesting aspect. I was like, oh, I didn't think of those as relation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It was fun.
Yeah. So then after you got, and were you just working with those companies then?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after that ran its course and the bust, and went back to work for my family, been there ever since. So.
Okay.
And then, of course, being a landlord can be pretty boring.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same stuff every day unless you're buying and selling. And our family does neither of those. We just hold. So we had the empty space. Well, we didn't have an empty space, but we had the building across from the arena in Everett. And I was looking for something to do. So that's when we started the pizzeria.
Okay. So what initially got you interested in pizza?
Oh, I've always loved pizza. It's been one of my main food groups my whole life.
Okay.
I love pizza. I like all styles. As long as it's done well, I like it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So then how was it getting started with Brooklyn Brothers then?
We had, the building across the street, and we had some, people may remember Irene's Antiques across the street from where the event center is now. And that space, the city would call it underutilized, because now you have this arena and you have a antique store there.
Yeah.
So it's not being utilized very well.
Right.
So and when the arena went in, there weren't that many good restaurants close to the arena.
Okay.
And we had a spot right across the street, so I thought it was a great opportunity. And pizza is sort of universal. It goes for families, it goes for everything. And so it made a lot of sense, and that's what I wanted to do. So
yeah,
then we did it.
Cool. And so when you were starting that one up, how did you start kind of digging back into your VC route and like trying to find other people, or what were you thinking?
What happened? I basically I said I wanted to start a pizzeria, and I don't remember who said, "Oh, go talk to Don and Vicky." They were tenants in our guitar shop in the same building.
Okay.
And Don was from New York and had always wanted to open a pizzeria.
Okay.
And his wife Vicky had worked on the dough recipe. So basically we decided we were going to start a pizzeria.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Okay. And then, and so I'm assuming he had studied or done it with
No, he just has, his family back in New York had a restaurant, but Don, he just had really good taste buds, and he'd been around pizza long enough in New York that he knew what the product should be.
Okay.
And how to make it its best.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So then how did you guys, when you guys were starting to get started and put everything together, then how did that process kind of go and all of that?
Well, we decided to do it, and, my brother, Vicky, and Don and I, formed the company, and then we being my brother and I and our employees built out the space and put everything together. And then, it was on January 1st, I forget what year, 2006 or something, we opened up to the public, and it was nice and slow at first. I always told them, crawl, walk, run. We're gonna crawl along and see how it goes before I put any more money, because I financed everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, we're just gonna see how it goes, and things built steadily, and we never really advertised and never discounted back then, and it just grew and kept growing. So.
Yeah. Very cool. So then how did that, throughout that time when you were growing and it was kind of slow, was there any point where you were like questioning, like, was this a good idea or should we keep going?
I don't remember That because I think our sales kept growing. I had to continue to put funds in for our first couple of years, but after that, we probably turned the corner and we're doing all right. So
Okay.
yeah.
Nice. And then as you guys were growing and stuff, what were kind of how did you guys come to the decisions that you have now, which, like you sell all of your pizzas by the slice?
We sell our signature pies by
The signature ones.
Yeah.
Okay. So you sell those ones, and then what kind of came to the decision? Because I feel like more and more pizza companies have gone towards the route of like not selling by the slice or only selling like 2 or 3 types.
So that goes back to our authenticity of trying to be a New York pizzeria. And
Okay.
if you go into any port pizzeria, most 90% of the pizzerias in New York City, you're going to have sales by the slice.
Okay.
And so that's just going to be part of who we are. I think Pagliacci, most of their places, except for the restaurants, they're similar.
Okay.
But yeah, so by the slice was always something we wanted to do.
Yeah. Okay. And then as far as coming up for your recipes and stuff, you guys didn't go a lot of the standard routes that like if you go to a normal pizza place, they'll have like their very standard like cheese, pepperoni, all these. How did you guys kind of come up with the recipes and make it your own?
Well, the signature pies Don put together and like having ricotta on a pizza is a bit unusual, but everyone who has it loves it.
Yeah.
And so those signature pies, which we've only changed one out since we opened, give you, some authentic flavor. We want to be authentic New York, and that's why there's no fruit offered on our menu. And a lot of people, and so why a lot of people just say that pineapple is not an authentic pizza ingredient. You're not going to find it in Italy or New York City. So that's sort of why we stick to that authenticity of not having fruit on the pizza.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything personally against. I should be careful because there are people can feel pretty strongly about it. I mean, if people want Canadian bacon pineapple, all power to them. I think it's great. Taco pizzas and all the crazy stuff out there. I think it's got an audience, and I'm all for people getting what they want.
Yeah.
But if they want something authentic, high quality ingredients, thin crust or the Sicilian, then we're probably going to be your best bet in this area.
Yeah. Well, and then as far as like sourcing the ingredients and stuff, you guys have gone through lengths to make sure you're getting, again, keeping authentic with that. How have you kind of gone through that process?
Well, we started and, I was, at the beginning, it was a bit of, Don was uncompromising on what he was going to use in the pizzas. And, the San Marzano tomatoes from Italy for our sauce is probably the most expensive tomato you can get. So but that's what we use for our sauce.
Yeah.
And our pepperoni is the top shelf. We use this, the cupping pepperoni that's been a traditional thing, and we really stick to those things. And then Polio cheese, which we've used since we've opened, is a New York Italian cheese company, and it's all made in a dairy up in upstate New York.
Okay.
And it probably better than half of the pizzerias in New York City will use Polio. The other half may use Grande.
Okay.
And a spattering of other stuff. But those are the two main cheeses. But we use Polio.
Yeah.
And have since day one. So.
Yeah. Very cool. And then the dough process is a big process in and of itself, right?
Oh, yeah. Everyone thinks, as you probably know,
Yeah.
having a bakery,
Right.
everyone thinks that the bread, the dough is the easy part. And it's probably our most challenging thing to get right day in and day out. Not that the customer is going to see any difference, but because we hand toss, so the handleability, making sure it's we proof our dough for 3 days to develop flavor.
Yeah.
Things, if you got too much yeast or not, all kinds of temperature, the humidity, how long it was in the mixer, all these things can impact how it ages those 3 days. So it is crazy how much time we spend working on our dough.
Yeah.
And now we opened a commissary to produce our dough about a year ago, And it's really enabled us to start dialing things into, and we're not there yet, but we're going to achieve a much more internally consistent
Yes.
product. Everything goes out, we throw out a lot of dough, right? When it's bad, it goes out.
Right.
We don't serve it. We can't use it. We
Yeah.
can't toss it. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is that it's tough, and we're working on it continually. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Dough is definitely one of those things that like everything affects it. So you're working in the Northwest where you can have everything from very hot, pretty warm, humid days to
Yep.
like cold, humid days to cold, drier days. Like you
Yep.
have everything in between, and it makes a complete difference.
Human error. People, we temp our dough before when it's done mixing, and we also, look, and there's a hand feel, and if you want all the operators to do the same thing and
Yeah.
pull it at the same time, well, that's where the human factor gets into things, and that's where things can go wrong.
Yep.
And along with all the temperature and humidity and all that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. I was curious, and this is actually kind of an extra question. Because you said you had focused on strategic planning as for your master's. How have you integrated that with Brooklyn Brothers?
Well, I'd say maybe I think, oh boy. I'd like to say that we did a high-end planning lots of planning, but we really didn't. As most startups go, you sort of see an opportunity, and it's whether you got, the guts to go and give it a try, and we did. I'd say that, there's the planning parts is when I said we're going to put in a POS system, and none of my partners wanted to because all they looked at is the price tag.
Yep.
I was like, no, we got to do this because if we're going to continue growing, we can't manage it without a POS system.
Right.
So things like that. The new locations. I think maybe a very strategic thing was the commissary. To get that dough consistency across all the stores, and someday hopefully some economics of it. Right now it's more of a control thing,
Yeah.
but it's been good. And I by nature I'm always looking down the road. So
Yeah.
where we're right now, everybody, including us, are very short-term focused
Yes.
as far as we're going to make it through this pandemic, and how can we maximize today.
Yeah.
And but longer term, after we get back to normal, and we will get back to normal,
Yeah.
then we'll start taking another look at where we are and where we want to go. So
Yeah.
right now, that's sort of we've actually done some things during the pandemic. People know that we have an awful online ordering system, and we've spent the last, I don't know, longer than that. Since November, we kicked off with a company to put a new system together, and
Okay.
we've had to redesign our whole menu a couple times, and in the redesign meaning how it's put in the database
Yeah.
so that it appears properly, and we're getting really close
Yeah.
to being able to launch this, and it'll have a rewards program in there.
Wow.
Not right away, but we'll launch that shortly after.
Okay.
So that we undertook, during the pandemic, because it just showed our current. When we switched to Toast, and their online ordering just is not good for pizzerias, and
Yeah.
so we needed to do something. So this was the next step.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. Yeah, it is something that I've talked to a lot of restaurant owners and local business owners and stuff, and that like the online ordering, it's like certain things, like there's so many options out there, but none of them fit your business. They're all like 70 to 80% there, and so like working with my bookkeeper, she's like, so what is this thing right here? We got money in, but where does it go to?
Right.
And I'm like, well, I don't know, because some of them take their fee out first, so you don't know if it's actually for that amount, and then some bring in afterwards. So it's that whole thing has been like a huge learning curve.
and awful, we all sort of got thrown into it.
Yes.
We've been doing it for a while. We were originally with a company called Revention. We got Revention, that must have been like year 4 or 5 of our development. We had them up until this last year when we finally said, it just wasn't doing what we needed it to do anymore. But it was pretty pizza centric.
Okay.
Pretty easy to use, and the online ordering worked pretty well. But the company just wasn't supporting the product very well. So we need to make a change to something that was a little more up to date.
Right.
And Toast has been great in that respect. Now with the new online ordering system, I think we'll be in pretty good shape going forward. So
Cool.
Yeah.
So how has Brooklyn Brothers fared during COVID and everything with the shutting down restaurants and reopening restaurants and everything? How's that all been?
Luckily we never shut down.
Okay.
We were closed indoor dining.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's without the PPP loans, I don't know where we'd be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've needed them, we got them, and not on the second round. We only Everett Mukilteo received a loan. The other two didn't qualify.
Okay.
So, but the Everett and Mukilteo, but mainly Everett. Everett is our sort of flagship, our biggest volume store.
Yeah.
But it's our biggest dine-in. It's all dine-in. We've never delivered out of there.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And you go to downtown Everett right now, the streets are empty.
It's just dead.
So that's been our biggest. That was our cash cow that sort of went dry.
Yeah.
So that's why we've really needed the loans. And it'll before that store really comes back, we'll need the arena functioning again. We need the courts and the downtown businesses operating. And,
everyone to come back to work.
Exactly. Because they're not there.
Yeah.
And it's the Starbucks up the street even closed.
Really?
Yeah, on Colby.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, just pretty wild.
Yeah. Wow.
So we're going to survive, but it's been an interesting time to live through and to be in business, and our staff has been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
We have had no, knock on wood, staff get infected.
Yeah.
You never know if it happens at work or if what they're doing on their private time.
Right.
But the fact that it didn't happen on their private time or at work is fantastic. So that means we're keeping our customers safe.
Yep.
Our employees are safe. They've done a great job of dealing with the public, especially the ones who don't want to mask and don't want to follow the rules, which is difficult and a daily occurrence. But they've persevered, and that part has been great. We've been able to keep people employed safely through this whole thing. So
well, and I think that's been it's been great to be able to provide that place of work, but also, it's a difficult time for everyone. Regardless if you're doing well or not, there's a underlying level of stress. I've talked about it a few times on the podcast with just, especially last year, there was this underlying tension. Even if people weren't worried about the virus, there was this underlying tension of what was.
We call it COVID fatigue.
Yeah.
I mean that's a national term, but it describes that everyone is, regardless of whether you've had it or it just affects and it has an impact on everything you want to do, everything you can do, and it gets to be real fatigue when you can't socialize like you want to. And your sports teams weren't playing, for the first part of this, and so it just we at the beginning. I think everyone was optimistic this would be a 2-3 month thing, and we'd get back on track. So I think when the expectation keeps getting moved out and out, the fatigue just gets worse and worse. Yeah. And people begin to have different reactions to the fatigue and the things getting moved out. Yeah. So it's real. It really is.
Yeah. And that's why I'm just total kudos to the team and just the people that are working on the front lines, because they have to deal with that. They have to deal with those people that are frustrated, and they're not mad at the person that's serving them. They're not even mad about the mask thing. It's just something to vent their frustration towards. So they put it towards that, and they throw it at, my team members and stuff. And I hear it, from the office or when I'm on the floor and stuff. And you're just like, no, it's not their fault. It's not their decision. It's not even my decision. It's the decision of what the state's.
Right.
So don't take it out on them. Write letters if you want to, but
Yeah, I
So
mean, you have to remember we're in the hospitality business, and
Yeah.
that means that we need to make people as comfortable as possible,
Right.
and be, and regardless of how they act.
yeah,
And just because one guy came in or one person came in and was acted very poorly does not mean that you should greet the next person fresh and with a positive attitude.
Right.
And sometimes that gets to be a little fatiguing.
It is.
So it's something that we're sensitive to, and we try and give the staff kudos whenever we can. And,
Yeah.
But it's tough.
yeah, for sure. All right. What do you see as the future of Brooklyn Brothers?
Well, sort of what I said was right now it's very short term. We're hoping that maybe next year in 2022 we'll start to see things as far as people going out to eat in groups and frequently, and events happening where we have events out here in the courtyard that
Yeah.
bring people in, that those things will happen again.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So when, like I said before, we're not really making any plans other than to make it into that day comes.
Yep.
And then we're really looking forward to welcoming everybody back in every way we can. But we are open, so,
Yep.
delivery, we didn't deliver over the weekend, but,
Light snowstorm.
Yeah. Delivery is back up, and we'll have the new app out soon, so,
Nice.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions.
Oh, boy.
The first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most over the last 3 months?
Oh, I should have written some of these things down. Because there was something that I did get, and now I'm going blank on what it was. It probably was a book I bought. I mean, I just love to read, and
Mhm.
all right, here's one. I bought a new wine decanter that, so it's $45, I think, which was a fair bit of money, but it's one that you put it on top of the bottle, you flip the bottle open, and then it aerates as it drains into the decanter.
Oh,
And
okay.
then you can flip it back over, and it aerates a second time as it goes back into the bottle. So now you've got a nicely aerated wine that's in the original bottle.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I've had a lot of fun with that.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. I might have to check that out because
Yeah.
we've launched wine now, and so I like
Yeah.
serving out of the bottle, but then it's like, then you've got to wait and swirl, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the wine, but
Yeah.
definitely all reds will benefit from some, time out of the bottle.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Very cool. Pretend you have a friend coming from out of town. What would the first day look like here?
Well, I would say in the old days, Seattle we'd spend some time down there to typically the market,
Mhm.
Depending on their interests, we might go out to Woodinville and a few wineries. But now coming up onto the island, it's we'll maybe getting them out on the boat to go do some crabbing.
Yeah.
Going down to the parks to walk on the beach. Excuse me, and do some hiking. We've actually, since we've lived here, we've camped at the state park down on the end. But because a bunch of friends came up from Bellevue, and we
Mhm.
all camped out down there. It was great.
Nice.
And there is a lot of great stuff close by here.
Yeah.
It's a great location. So,
Yeah.
but it's really just being on the island and we have a nice, beautiful view, and just love sitting back and enjoying ourselves.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Who is an interesting or fascinating person in this community that I should interview next?
I thought about this, and what I didn't do was look through your whole list of people to know who you have. And
Okay.
I talked to your dad this morning. I said, I'm going to say your son should interview you. So I was the first one. I'm like, of course. But
I actually do plan on bringing him back for the 100th episode. I don't know if he's
No.
aware of that yet, but I
Okay.
plan on doing it.
well, did you talk to Chris Pepper of Ale Spike Brewery?
No, not yet.
Okay, well, we carry their beer in I think Tap does too, but we carry their beer, one tap, from Allspike, and he has opened a brewery out by the airport.
Yeah.
And he's got some great beer, and you know, I've met him and talked to him briefly, but a deeper discussion about why he opened one on Camano Island, and you know, what he has to do with the water to make good beer and all that, it'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So
for sure. All right. And lastly, if you could have a message on a billboard right on Camano Island as you're driving on, what would that say?
Probably something along the lines of "Welcome to Paradise. Please treat it gently." You know, or you know, stronger would be with respect.
Yeah.
You know, don't litter. You know, don't if you're on a trail, don't go off the trail.
Yeah.
You know, just enjoy it and then go home.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I was just talking to someone from the Camano Island Sheriff Support Foundation. Or I missed up some of those letters, but he was talking about the installation of cameras on some of the state park trails and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Because they have that. They've got litter, and they're like, well, who's doing all this? So they've, you know, certain trails and stuff have some cameras of some sort, so that way they can try and keep those trails cleaner and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's terrible that you have to get to that point, but you've probably read about all the increased pressure on our outdoors since the pandemic.
Yes.
Well, it's been happening since we lived here. You know, I love the outdoors, and I do a lot of hiking and climbing, and you drive out to a trailhead, you know, 15 years ago, and no problem getting a parking spot.
Yep.
And you see a few people on the trail, but not that many. Now, if you're not there at 6, 7 a.m., you can't. There's no place to park. And we're loving it. I love the expression, we're loving our trails to death. I mean, it's just not just the well, the litter is one thing, but people who stray off the path and cause erosion, and the problems go on and on and on. So, you have to respect it.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
My pleasure.
All right. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Brett Alkan for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/EP84. That's CamanoCommons.com/EP84. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.